Good morning. By way of introduction, I'm Laramie Taylor. I'm a professor of communication at the University of California, Davis, and the chair of the Department of Communication. I'm going to be talking today about fans and the identity of fans in a digital world. One of the early critiques of the digital age was the dissolution or weakening of community, that time spent online served to reduce community involvement. In fact, this preceded the digital age as its precursor technologies, including things like cable and satellite television, facilitated entertainment that was increasingly experienced in isolated environments. Importantly, this weakening of community was mostly understood in terms of weaker ties and commitments to collective endeavors. Putnam famously described a decline of membership in formally organized bowling leagues, but also showed that church attendance declined, membership in fraternal and community groups diminished. These trends have only continued during the internet age. In addition to giving a sense of community, the groups to which we belong constitute an important element of our identity. Some theories of identity would, in fact, argue that our group memberships constitute our entire identity. Others would make a distinction between social identity, the understanding of ourselves relative to the groups to which we belong, and personal identity, understanding ourselves relative to absolute characteristics or traits. Regardless, diminishing community involvement also meant, broadly, greater uncertainty about identity. As more and more people become affiliated with fewer and fewer formal organizations, we're left potentially increasingly adrift with regard to our sense of self. This sense of uncertainty around identity has been hypothesized to underlie some of the partisan political extremism that's been observed in so many places in Europe, the Americas, and parts of Asia in recent years. Extreme political views offer a clear identity in a world where that can seem to be elusive or entirely missing. Although often cited as a threat to identity, the digital world has simultaneously provided opportunities for new foundations of identity, new objects around which identity can be built, providing opportunities to connect with new groups and to develop and explore specialized interests. Among other possibilities, the internet and social media in particular provide opportunities to develop fan identities and to connect with other fans. Fans have been defined in many ways, but my preferred definition focuses on identity. A fan is someone whose identity or sense of self is partly constructed in terms of an affinitive, one-way relationship with an external object. When a fan thinks of the self, they think in part about their relation to that external object, be it an individual celebrity, a sports team, or a fictional world. So if a fan is asked, "Who are you?" they might respond, "I am a father, I am a teacher, I am a fan of Harry Potter." Okay. Now we can see evidence of how online tools have facilitated the development of fan identities by looking at diverse types of fans. We'll start with sports fans. The last 20 years have seen an explosion in international sports fanship. Being a sports fan has traditionally been a very local phenomenon. You are a fan of the team representing your own city or region or country. But today, the link between geography and fan identity has been uncoupled through online, especially social media tools. Fans can identify with teams from all over the world, using social media tools to engage with other fans and the object of their fanship, the athlete, the team, or the club of which they are a fan. My lab conducted a study several years ago in which we examined a particular sporting event, a Premier League football competition between Real Madrid and Barcelona, popularly referred to as El Clásico. We identified 15 pairs of YouTube videos describing specific elements of one year's game. For each pair, the content was essentially the same, but one video was in English, the other in Spanish. Conceptually, we anticipated that the Spanish language videos would mostly elicit responses from fans in Spain, whereas the English language videos would mostly elicit responses from fans elsewhere. Now keep in mind that El Clásico is a game between two teams, both from cities in Spain. Yet, when we counted, there were twice as many comments on the English language videos as there were on the Spanish language videos. Reading the comments quickly revealed that these were passionate fans, ardently defending one team, occasionally insulting the other, whether they were in English or they were in Spanish. 30 years ago, being a fan of Real Madrid in California or Seoul or Delhi would have been a profoundly isolating experience. If you were lucky, you might find a bar where a few other fans would congregate to watch games. But today, with online tools, a community of other Real Madrid fans is readily assembled whenever we seek for one. In the same study, we also scraped the contents of all the comments and conversations that were appended to those YouTube videos, and we used automatic content analytic tools to examine them. A number of differences emerged between the two sets of comments. Relative to the comments from English-speaking fans, Spanish-speaking fans were more likely to use offensive language, for example. Spanish-speaking fans were also more likely to make comments about the team collectively rather than about individual players. But perhaps of greatest interest, the Spanish-speaking fans were almost twice as likely to use the inclusive first-person pronoun, we, when describing the team. So, in describing their preferred team, Spanish-language fans more often said, we won, or we could have played better. Spanish-language fans were also more positive in their comments, doing more supporting than attacking relative to their English-speaking counterparts. Collectively, these differences seem to suggest a difference in the strength or character of fanship. English-speaking fans still clearly identified with the team, but not overall as strongly as the Spanish-speaking fans seem to. Although online tools facilitate international sports fanship, there may still be something about that geographic link that makes fan identification easier. Another domain in which online tools have facilitated the development of fan identity is for fans of fictional narratives. These are fans of a fictional text or series, such as a television program or a series of movies or novels. There's strong evidence that the prevalence of fans of fictional narratives has really exploded only since the advent of the kind of online tools that can facilitate fan interaction. For example, in the US, a major cultural event for fans of fictional narratives is the annual Comic-Con, or Comic Convention, held in San Diego each summer. This is a week-long event at which fans of popular culture texts, especially comic books, anime, science fiction and fantasy television and film, gather to celebrate their fanship. From its founding in 1970 through the year 2000, attendance grew from about 300 to about 45,000. From 2000 to 2019, the most recent year Comic-Con has been held, attendance went from 45,000 to 130,000, and a wait list that's rumored to be about 300,000 people. Okay, there's been dramatic growth, and it seems likely that this growth has arisen in part from some of the same factors driving the growth of international sports fans. Finding opportunities to talk about and enact fanship with other fans using online tools. Let me give an example. When I was in middle school, so about age 12 to 14, there were, as far as I know, about 4 people in my school who were fans of J.R.R. Tolkien, author of The Hobbit and the Lord of the Rings trilogy. There was me, Joel, Tim, and maybe Ben, but only maybe. And we didn't know anyone else who was into it, except, maybe a little bit Tim's mom. At the time, we thought that our interest in Tolkien was unusual because in our school it was. That sense of the unusual meant that we didn't talk about it much, even amongst ourselves. But today, it's an entirely different story. My 15-year-old son can go online to read about Tolkien on the Tolkien Society's official information pages. He can talk about Tolkien on 30 different subreddits. He can read Hobbit-related fan fiction on fanfiction.net. He can look at cosplaying fans that he finds on Naver. Or he could, if he had any interest whatsoever in Tolkien. Instead, he talks with strangers around the world about his favorite anime, My Hero Academia. Now, interestingly, both passive consumption of online fan material and active engagement with other fans using online tools are independently related to strength of fan identification. My lab conducted a pair of surveys of self-identified fans of fictional narratives, both of a specific science fiction, television, and movie series, and of fans of a wide range of fictional narratives. Altogether, we surveyed over 600 fans of more than 75 different narrative texts. We asked respondents how important being a fan was to their identity, to their sense of self. There was a range of responses, but most respondents said that their fanship was slightly to somewhat important to the way they saw themselves. We then asked respondents about specific fan behaviors. We found that discussing the object of their fanship with others on the internet was consistently and positively associated with importance of fan identity. But reading and looking at web pages relating to the object of their fanship was just as strongly associated with importance of fan identity. Each of these was a more important and more powerful predictor of strength of fan identity than repeated viewing or reading of the object of fanship itself, or of talking about the object of fanship with other people in real life. Somehow, being able to connect with resources about your text, being able to talk to distant others rather than immediate others, made fanship for fictional narratives more accessible or more important as an element of identity. Now, I think there are some important implications of these findings. First, I think it's heartening to know that the kind of work involved in developing a sense of identity can and does occur in an online environment. Although organizing that identity around what might seem to most people to be a trivial object, such as a sports team or a fictional world, might seem strange, the key features of that object are telling. Namely, that they're potentially geographically disconnected, that they're objects of a particular affinity for some people, they're very important to some people, and that the number of people is potentially relatively small within any geographically bounded area. Because, of course, these characteristics do not only describe the object of identity for fans, they could also be used to describe minority status, okay, or stigma status. It could describe the relationship, for example, that a member of a minority religious group holds towards the overall religious organization or community. It could describe sexual orientation, or really any other facet of identity that puts the identifier in the minority, particularly if stigmatized. For those folks, this research suggests that identity work can be accomplished by learning and by communicating and engaging in community online. Second, in the case of fans, we see digital tools being employed to develop identities that are not only independent of geographic locality, but would reasonably be expected to cut across boundaries of geography, of race and ethnicity, and even of ideology. I think that commonality that's potentially achieved through this cross-cutting identification is a potentially powerful thing. Now, I'm not saying we're going to achieve global peace and harmony through our shared love of Harry Potter, but reducing the importance of our differences in light of things we have in common can only be a good thing. And it's something that's possible, apparently, largely through online tools.